All right. I'm just going to set it up.
Okay. Set
Aha.
it up.
All
Set it up.
right. All right. All right. Here we are once again with the homie Seanan Zook. And today we're going to be discussing the new moon and the significance of the moons in a lunar calendar in the Chinese cosmology,
Mm,
and the significance, or maybe what we can expect chi wise from the moon
mm.
that's coming up, which is a fire rat. So we're leaving a fire tiger moon, entering a
Right.
fire rabbit moon, and these are the first two moons of the lunar calendar.
Right.
So
Yeah.
every year, the last month of the year, ox, and
Hmm.
then the first month of the new year, tiger, and then the
Hmm.
second month is rabbit. And those are
Hmm.
significant animals, and their symbology are all significant in describing how this cosmology views the transition between winter and spring. And then the water
Hmm.
rabbit is also a good kind of actually, I'm gonna let you discuss all that. But the water rabbit then leads into kind of the almost summer, about to get into summer months.
You
So
mean the fire rabbit. The fire rabbit, yeah, the fire rabbit
yeah.
moon. Yeah, the rabbit moon is I mean, one of the things that I think is important to talk about is this is a system of timekeeping and tracking the seasons because it's the sequence of time. Is the calendrical astrology is different than say personal astrology, right? So we're like they complement each other because when you're doing charts for individuals and reading personal fate, then the data for that is actually built on top of or comes out of the data of the sequence of time, which is the calendrical astrology, of which the Chinese tradition is incredibly is like it's like the geek in the room. It goes way back. Like I'm actually reading this book right now. I started picking it back up again. I'm so glad I did. It's like
Hold it
really
up.
cool. Yeah, it's a really super cool book.
It's
Called
blurred.
Is it? Oh yeah, I know why. Because I'm supposed to be like this.
Okay,
Can you see it now?
astrology and cosmology in early China. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this came out in 2015, actually. And this guy, David Pankanier. I just listened to a presentation he did this morning on this file on YouTube from a talk that he did in Milan in 2022. And Duke can't speak publicly to save his life, really. But he's a really interesting, he's making a lot of connections because there's not too many academic presentations of the material of astrology and astronomy as it relates to astrology. Because just to clarify, astronomy is the tracking of heavenly bodies, right? Like which every culture in the world has done. Like we're all very interested on, to use the ancient term, how heaven affects Earth and how Earth can mirror heaven, right? So that's the central concern, right? Like cross culturally, that is a major concern. And so tracking the astronomical bodies then leads to a field of, from a Chinese standpoint, astrology, which is to extract the wisdom of those bodies and then track it through time, right? And to learn how to behave. So when you look at calendrical astrology in China, especially the ancient stuff, it reads like like list making. If this and that, then this. If this, then that, then this. And it's it's a bunch of cautionary kind of. It's for rulers because they were considered to be the most important. So you had this data, and you would go to all around to the rulers, like the Warring States period was a bunch of teachers out there trying to persuade these renegade rulers, these warlords essentially, how to behave, and that if you behave in this way, then all the people will automatically follow you, right? Because you will be in alignment with heaven. So this is an incredibly important that is the significance of Chinese, what we call Chinese culture. I mean, they're obviously, it's such a simplification to even use that word, because it's a Latinization of a very small subset of so-called Chinese history by the Portuguese, and like actually has nothing to do with the bigger picture, of like all the people in that area, as you well know, having traveled there. So when we're using this word, it's just for convenience, but there, in some ways, there is no China. It's just like a series of haphazard cultures. And what's interesting about the so-called the kind of Chinese modality is that it integrated all the different voices from a lot of different traditions and preserved teachings that it did not originate. It actually brought them in and integrated it with this. And that's the whole point. How can we make everything work together? So bring that all up to say that it is the cosmological importance of the calendrical approach can't be understated, because it's constantly trying to track what's the correct behavior right now, not how do I succeed necessarily, but what's appropriate, and because it's a long-term game. It's like, not how do I get what I want, or how can I be empowered. That's a very narrow interpretation that we're prone to in the West, because we're hysterical and aggressive. Our tendency is to worship yang, and what's unfortunate about that is that in this time of year, the consequences, I mean, this is cautionary, but it's meant to just be encouraging ultimately, because what we're talking about is to be appropriate and then therefore find success, because that is the assumption, is that if we're appropriate with the cycle of time, we'll get what we need. We will find success. So there's a kind of trust, even in, you might say, faith, in the Chinese worldview. It's like, even if your success doesn't come immediately, like, okay, I've been appropriate and I got, things
What's more
screwed over.
important is being in alignment with the way, being in alignment with
Appropriateness.
with the calendar of time.
Yeah. So like the caution going into the second moon is to remember that spring itself is not productive. So we're still in the second moon of spring, and there are indicators that are like, okay, things are starting to warm up, vibrations they're getting louder, like.
Well, that's curious to me. Let's talk a little bit about, so in the West, we view spring, I don't think that much different. Maybe we react to it differently, but in the West, spring is a time, like spring is springing. It's when things come back to life. It's when people start flirting with each other. It's when, a lot of animals start making love and making babies. Like it's baby making time. It's
right.
like getting
and that's
out there
the second
time.
moon. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's the second moon.
So that's the rabbit time.
Yeah, I mean,
So well, I'm just coming up with like generalities, but like everyone I think views spring as a time of like, yay, the shoots are coming, the geese are coming back. It's muddy now. It's not cold. It's almost warm. So how then? I think for me, what's been always fascinating is how does the Chinese tradition view these first 2 months? Number one, but also number two, how do they come up with tiger, rabbit, firewood, like all those? Because those are, in my experience, my personal experience with this system, generally tend to be uncannily accurate, in terms of how like fire, rabbit energy would be interpreted. And then I look at my surroundings, I'm like, oh, wow. So kind of a discussion on how we view, how Chinese view spring, tiger and rabbit, but then kind of a larger, maybe more difficult and ultimately perhaps fruitless discussion on how the heck they came up with tigers and rabbits to begin with.
Well, I mean, the short answer to the second question is thousands of years, like thousands of thousands, like tens of thousands of years of observation. Like some of the oldest recordings, or things that are written down, like never mind how long they've actually been practiced, but they were practiced long enough to be written down. The assumption in our culture is that everything we do, we record. And then so there's a record of it. There's some, so we're kind of assuming that like oh, like if it's written down, well, they must have just figured it out then, but no, actually, no. Like
No,
most of the work
that's a good point. That just because we have it written down, that's just the first time. That's the only written record available. Doesn't mean
available, but it
that's
might have
all
been
we
written
got.
down for 1,000 years before that, all were destroyed, or lost, so this is the first written record that survived the several thousand years until its discovery. So the supposition is that much of this, the creation of this calendrical system, is, thousands and thousands of years old and corresponds, no one knows actually where the 12 animal system came from. There is no origin for it, right?
I figured it'd be
So,
fruitful.
no, yeah, I mean, you can't really, but there's been many adaptions, and of course, there's a myth about it, involving the Jade Emperor, and that wanted to set down the sequence of time, so they were going to have a race, and only the first 12 could, the children's story, that basically, that's why the cat was excluded, and now the cat and the mice don't get along because of this race, and like all these different kind of cute little mythologies, but just way of like relating to, what we're talking about in the sequence of time. But like, as for the first question, and we can circle back to the second one again, is to say that like it's the 5 element theory, which is also another system that has no direct origin, just like yin and yang, that no direct origin. So many of these things just go back into antiquity, and probably associated with many of the shamanic traditions of Central Asia, because the assumption is that there was a great amount of influence from Central Asia and the shamanic traditions in relationship to like Baikal and the Bon tradition, that all those sorts of inquiries filter down into all the different traditions, including Buddhism and etc., to all the ways in which they influenced practices and thoughts throughout Central Asia into Asia. So what we understand as a Chinese tradition is obviously influenced by all of that as well. So like you have to push it way back to find these like core principles that are then utilized and then weaved together, over time to create something cohesive. But Ming was very clear to be like, yeah, this didn't come in like one central package. Like there was this idea and that idea, and then there's different people got weaved together. And the interesting thing about that particular pursuit is that it succeeded. How it succeeded and why we don't know where it came from, are two sides of the same coin, because a lot of those ancient traditions, you didn't put a name on it. You just wrote what, like, not having a no name teaching was actually a sign of its legitimacy. You don't put your name on it, and then that's how people know it's real. But if it's like, this is the teaching according to Shannon, everybody like, whatever, they're not listening,
Who? Or no,
yeah,
who?
yeah. And so that's the idea. Who, like, and then the teaching is lost. But if it's no name teaching, then people would listen. And so that's how these traditions have been carried for a really long time, as like a secret to, a secret teaching. Many people that I've given Polestar readings to have come back to me and said, I tried to find, like material about what you do. I can't find it. I'm like, yeah, because it has been carried in a way in which it's a direct transmission. And from the direct transmission, it doesn't mean direct transmission into a book, which is what we think is good thing to do, because we're interested in popularity. So the more your book sells, obviously that means there's something to, the teaching. But that's not the assumption of a no-name teaching. The no-name teaching is like, your fate is operative, right? And you meet the teacher because of your fate, and you roll with it. And then like many people don't have that fate, and they're not supposed to hear it, go in one ear out the other. So continue, is the just let it unfold naturally. So it's very unique in human society, not exclusive to the Chinese worldview. There's other traditions obviously speak the same way, because they're not inherently aggressive. We don't hear about them for the most part in our modern world, because we're interested in loud voices. So the spring, when we're talking about 5 element theory, the spring is meant to be this time of wood. And wood is like kind of wind. It's meant to be understood as like wind, that comes out from the stillness of water. Like, what's the first thing that moves is movement itself. And you can't really see movement. You can only see the things that's being moved, right? But movement itself is not something you can put on, you can't pin it down. Well, there it goes, there's movement. Like, you can feel movement and you can see things being moved, but the movement itself is not something you can track without a substance to push. And so wind is a perfect analogy of that. And that's the wood element, the appearance of the wood element, then creating patterns, and then patterns become form. Right? So that's a kind of sequence and the elemental understanding. The creation of patterns is fire, and is available seasonally, in this kind of transitional way, in the summer, late spring to summer into, say, fire into earth, and earth is then form. Right? That we've taken the potential of wind, which has no substance to it. It's just potential. Like, potential is.
So what you're saying is that each season, regardless of the particular moon, has its
Right.
own elemental
Yeah.
character.
Spring is wind. Spring is meant to be wind, and wood, the wood element. And that's why
And summer
tiger and fire. Yeah,
and
is the
fall.
fire. Metal. That's the refinement,
There's water.
and then
Oh,
the
I'm sorry,
winter
go
is
ahead.
water. Yeah,
Oh.
no, the metal is the kind of extractive and refining quality. We don't need everything. We just need these core things, right? Or we store this, and it's basically sorting things out, right? And that's very metal element, that refinement. And then water is the back to dispersion again, in the relationship between yin and yang. It's then yin takes over again. And then earth, the earth element is in the calendar anyway, is the earth element appears 4 times as a pivot, because the pivot is the appearance of earth rests on this assumption that continuity exists underneath everything. So in these places of transition, when we go from wind or wood to fire and movement, we need a break. We need a transition where everything can be calibrated, and then it moves to fire. Right. So this calibration point is where earth comes in and creates conditions that can move from wood to fire. So there is no earth season. There's 4 seasons, which are represented by those 4 elements that we talked about. But the earth season is the assumption that all one season moves into the next because of earth, because there's this.
Do the earth pivots coincide with solstices and equinoxes?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's a different calendar operation, is the chi nodes. And yes, no, not specifically to the solstices and equinoxes. Those are their own pivot in relation to the chi nodes. So that's what's called the 24 solar terms. So the interesting thing about the Tongshu is that there has several overlapping calendrical systems. They're all just kind of piled on to each other because they were all seen. Couldn't choose one or the other. So the Chinese approach is, how do we make them all work? How do we make them synchronize together? So what we're talking about loosely is the new moon, which are called the lunar ordinances, right? And that is we've gone into rabbit moon, and then what dragon moon going to be like, and what snake moon going to be like. These are a set of ordinances that are actually about the conduct of the ruler, conduct of the emperor, so to speak. The emperor should be doing this at this time, and then this at this time, and then the 24 chi nodes are also in relationship to that, but they're more like a farmer's almanac. There's sort of the original farmer's almanac of what to expect from nature as a farmer and what to be giving into it. So
Wow.
where those
This is
overlap.
super complicated. It's like a big old clockwork filled with stuff.
Yeah,
Let me.
there's several different cycles happening all at once. And so where those two overlap, and then there's, cultural things that happen in there. But where they kind of overlap and have a conversation, or what I enjoy about writing on the Tongshu is that, like, okay, in the daily expressions of the lunar ordinances, there's a foreshadowing that happens days before the next turn, right? So they are reference each other and how they operate quite frequently. So it's just all really, really fascinating. So that's not like an imposition. They actually relate to, it's a system of relatedness to each other. That's like incredibly fascinating. So, I mean,
Could give us an example here. So right now, the way I understand it, we are in a wood dragon moon.
No, we're in a wood dragon year.
I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, wood dragon year. Right, going into spring, which is generally a wood element.
That's right.
All right. And we're transitioning from a fire tiger into a fire rabbit.
Right. So there's a lot of different layers to that, right?
So all of the wood dragon, the wood spring, then we have a fire tiger and a fire rabbit coming out of a water rabbit ox here, all these things happening. So if we're gonna, like, the deeper we go, the more lost I will definitely get.
The more complicated it becomes, yeah.
Yeah, you become complicated. So let's say, I'd like to put you in the position of, like, the court astrologer. So the court astrologer, right? Seanan Zook and the prince. I'm gonna be the prince. All right, the prince.
Okay, you be the prince. All right.
I'm all like, yo, man, it's a new moon. It's the 10th. What do I do? I'm a fire snake, fire rabbit dude. What do I do?
Yeah.
You're all like, calm down.
For the most part. Yeah.
Calm down. Here's the chi that is available given these parameters. Like, how would you distill it to a dumb prince who's all like, I just want to play?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you were like a legitimate prince, you would just be going to play. And, like, I'd be like, good, yes, go play, because we'll run the government, right?
Okay, let's say I'm the king then. Let's say because in my house, I'm the king.
Right. No. So, what you're referring to is a kind of what is called the Qin notion of government, which is there is a magisterial class that actually runs the government. To give a snapshot on this in a way that doesn't take an hour, is to pull back and then zoom in. Okay. So we are already transitioned into, from the water rabbit into the wood dragon. In the wood dragon is this, effortless level of freshness, but wood dragon is also somewhat lightweight. So if we're expecting immediate, transformations, then we're probably being too aggressive and going too fast, right? We need to plot it and be open to be transformed through the educational process, to be patient.
Would it be more helpful to consider the wood dragon as a wind dragon?
Sure.
Because in my mind, I'm like, I can see like a wood dragon. I'm like, I don't even know, but like a wind dragon, I can see, like, I can see kind of the ethereal, almost playful majesty.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's inspired, which is why in other conversations that I've had, it's perennially inspired. It is inspiration itself. It is the nature of inspiration. So that means it comes and goes. It comes and goes. Like, that's why I call it kind of lightweight, because I don't mean that pejoratively. That's its power, is to be light, and to move through space, like, effortlessly from one thing to the next. So, given the wood of spring, you can't expect wood dragon to flicker kind of here and gone again, like not not lasting power. Too soon for that. In fact, just only recently in the calendar, with the turn of the last Chino, do you have the seasonal release of dragons from their frozen lakes. Because when the winter comes, every winter, all the dragons get locked up in frozen lakes. It's an analogy to the floods of spring, the floods of spring in China, when all the water gets locked up for winter and then gets released in the spring, right? So this is, you can't really understand, you can't expect to understand dragon without looking at that story, that cyclical story that happens every year, where in the winter, all the water and all the life, all the sense of movement gets locked up in alpine lakes and then is released in the spring, right? So just because the Chinese calendar is saying spring begins doesn't mean that the dragons have been released. It just means that there is this turn toward refreshment, the turn toward the wiggle, just a wiggle, that creates a little bit of warmth, but not power, like way too soon for power. And you're talking about a wood dragon anyway. So it's not coming with a heavy hand. It's coming with just fresh thoughts, a feeling of inspiration, like, the sun on your face. Like that's pretty much what spring is all about, is appreciating just, wow, winter's over. Great. Still a little chilly though, wear a jacket.
Word up, that's how it is right now in Minneapolis.
I feel good. I just feel good. I feel good, and like just feeling good. That's kind of all you need to do, Prince, is just feel good, and just and continue to just support that process. And in the process of really absorbing, kind of osmosis wise, this refreshment, you will see inspiration appear, omen. This is the kind of beginning of omen, like seeing our potential kind of like shimmer up in front of us and then disappear again, right? So this is the time in which that's happening, this particular time. And
how can I help you?
You have Venmo, so if I wants to do Venmo.
oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I do have Venmo.
Okay.
No cash.
Yeah. My Venmo is Sasha dash Matuzak. Yeah.
Do you have the little
I'm using my phone. I can't do it. Yeah, so I've got my phone. Listen.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you can't do that. So that's it. It's Sasha dash Matuzak.
Okay.
All right.
Does it have a picture associated with it? Just in case there's another Sasha.
There ain't no Sasha Matuzak out there but me, son.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm the only one. So when we're talking about
let me yeah, I got some thoughts. So now that sounds really nice. Inspiration is here, wood / wind dragon. Just enjoy the coming and be aware of and appreciative of the omens. Right?
It's the appreciation, yeah. Appreciate.
How does that differ? And is that a fire? How does the fire tiger, fire rabbit interplay with that? Number one, and then number two, how is it different from your average spring, if it is at all?
Well, every spring
is. There's such a thing as an average spring.
No, there's not really. But there is this process of yang coming to life. So if you're talking about an average spring, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about this process of yang going from this like under a seed under the ground to something sprouting. This is the same every year. It happens every year, right? So this notion of like shoots and sprouts coming up out of the ground still actually hasn't been released yet. That we're not there yet, but it's coming. Like with the spring equinox, that's when things like will move much faster. And that's happening, 10 days from now. So like if
Are we already in the fire rabbit moon? No.
Today. Yeah. Today is the start of the fire rabbit moon. So how
how does the fire rabbit, fire tiger interplay with, wood spring, wood dragon, release of the dragons, peep the omens? Is there something specific and yummy about this year?
The only thing that I can say for sure is that it makes us less patient. It makes us, yeah, the fire aspect makes us much less patient because it energizes and catalyzes the situation. So very specifically, the teaching of the second moon is to watch our expectations because we're ready. Like that's the feeling. Like I'm feeling ready. Like I'm feeling like I want to do a lot. It's like that's when, because it's the wood element is associated with organs in the body, which relates very specifically to the liver and the Hun spirit. The Hun spirit is the dreaming, is the dreaming
When?
spirit.
Oh, when?
Yeah, the Hun.
Mm.
It's the
Soul.
Hun. Yeah, the dreaming. It's like this dreaming energy that is very motivating, very inspirational. So having, the moon itself be the character, the chi character of the moon itself being modified by fire, not necessarily a problem, but it's just you should check your aggression, and maybe listen more than you speak. That would be the main suggestion, because there's a lot of people. What do they say? Like the most dangerous person in the room is a green belt, you know, knows a little bit of something and thinks they want to, they want to like prove themselves rather than, maybe be interested in learning more. They're not, they need to maybe become humbled so that they can be like, oh, okay, there's a lot more here. Like we might need to have those kinds of movements.
Mm.
Because the real caution is we could, especially in a fire tiger, or well, it's risky both ways, but they're different. But the central risk of the first two moons is that we forget that it's spring and not summer. When summer is the time, there's only one season out of all the seasons where ambition is actually appropriate, and that's summer. Because that's when the chi is available to be bringing to completion, to accumulate, to consume, to really go after things. That's when it's appropriate, not any other time. So what's the risk of being ambitious and aggressive in the spring is very specifically ruining your potential. That's what the chin shirt would say. So don't take yourself so seriously. Play. It's good to play. It's good to like even express yourself. Like I think it's a great time to make mistakes. Go ahead and make a mistake. Just be ready, to make mistakes. Be ready to like actually fall back and be like, oh, okay, this is okay. All right. I shouldn't have, that whole process that we do, because that would actually enable the recovery of freshness and potentially even broaden your perspective, which would actually be the real nourishment of foolish behavior. The real nourishment of foolish behavior is to go, oh, wait, is to awaken. Yeah. Not to be like, oh, I'm gonna double down and try again. Like that would not be good. Not learning your lesson and not being open to reform and education, to reform our conduct, would be catastrophic. Like in the long term, even if it doesn't affect us this year, it puts in really bad habits, where we diminish our potential, because aggressive conduct in spring diminishes our capacity and our potential in the summer, and then brings bitterness in the fall.
Because we burn out quick, don't accomplish everything we want, and then suddenly there we are in the fall being like, damn, another year while I have
This could have been so much better. And then if you start
so much doper.
and then if you start externalizing or blaming other people, like you've
First
lost.
person I'm gonna blame is you, Big Scott. I'm like, you told me, but you didn't tell me enough.
Right. Yeah. Over and over again. Over and over.
Yeah.
Again.
How come you didn't call me every day to remind me?
Mm-hmm,
yeah, man.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So I mean, there's this notion of sublimation, like where we start developing discipline. That's gonna come into play once we hit, especially when we hit the equinox, the spring equinox. That'd be a great time to start really being disciplined with our behavior. But right now, it's two things. It's managing our emotional expectations, right? And then I would say embracing delayed gratification, like as like proactively. I mean, like, it's kind of like, you see that cool jacket in the window and you're like, I'll come back. You know, like I don't need to do that right now. Like if I got money burning in my pocket, like yeah, it's all good. Like keep it, you know, like just wait. Play, do things that don't cost a lot of energy, right? Using the resources that we have, making connections with people, you know, flirting. But like this is the image that's happening here in the relationship between yang and yin, which is the story of the season, is that we've got basically prepubescent yang and prepubescent yin. And that's, you know, so what can you expect from that? Not a whole lot. Like they're not being, you know, they're not at the stage of fertility, but you can see the fertility. You can see that, like they're going to be a cute couple, right? You can see that, but they're not available for that. They go, shut up, you know, like let's go play, you know, whatever, you know, like that's the image that we should be using. Like because both of them could still be kind of tomboy and you know whatever. There's still a lot of pliability and flexibility to the situation. We don't want to start like putting them in boxes yet. Right? We want to leave the situation open and allow for mistakes to happen or allow for some kind of natural beauty, spontaneous beauty to occur. It can be really gorgeous, you know. This is a really delicate time of year that can be really absolutely stunning if we let it be instead of like, well, this is what it needs to, you know, you need to be a piano, you need to practice your piano, young man, you know, like you should let the kid play instead
Are
of
you speaking directly to me there? What the heck?
But I mean, obviously, Didi is expressing his capacity to eventually be a chef.
I guess. I
That's
mean, he
what
just loves food. You know,
exactly.
he just loves
Yeah.
food.
I
Yeah.
mean, every chef should love.
Didi, by the way, for anyone watching, is my son. He's my younger son. He's 12. You know, that boy loves to cook and eat, but he hates dishes. But he doesn't mind chopping.
Okay, well,
So
that's yeah.
he likes the front end and he likes the mid, but the dishes part, he's all like, "Bro, can we get a dishwasher?" Which honestly, I don't know too many people who aren't like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right, that's true. That's true.
Who's all like,
You need
"I
to,
don't want to eat. I want to do the dishes."
yeah. I was always anytime I went to dinner parties, I was always the one who like, oh, I'll do the dishes. I would get on it like even when people were still like enjoying their dessert, you know, or whatever. And if I was done and I relaxed for a minute, I get up and just start doing it, like collecting and organizing, just
Are
because.
you? Is that the wood pig in you or the fire pig? What are you?
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of a wood pig element. I mean, it's also just in my own life a sense of maturity. Like I didn't cook any of that. Like I didn't do any
That's
fucking work.
true.
I
I've
didn't do.
never seen you cook ever, bro. Like
I
ever.
I can, but you know, anytime I go to a gathering like that, I'm like, I didn't do any of this front end work. So all the
Yeah,
people
yeah,
who did shouldn't work. You know, they
yeah,
shouldn't
yeah,
work
yeah.
from here on out.
My ass is
So
usually doing the front end work. I'm usually prepping, cooking. You know, that's usually my side of it. And then I
yeah,
still end up doing the dishes.
yeah,
Man,
unfair, isn't it? It's
it
absolutely
is.
unfair.
It is. All right, man. I think I feel you. You know, the rabbit moon sounds like a really delicate moon. I think, you know, it's not, hey, play, relax, appreciate the omens. It can be beautiful. Don't
Yeah.
play your cards too quick.
Yeah,
Don't play your
that's a
cards
good.
too,
Mhm.
right? You know, you got aces, chill on them, slow roll them aces. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
So
right.
if that's the case, um, I don't want to. I think I kind of just want to leave it there, but um, and you did mention some of the dangers, you
Hmm.
know, moving too quickly. Maybe the equinox can bring a little bit more discipline. It just
It
seems like
should.
a
Yeah.
lightweight, not frivolous, but a lightweight moon. I don't know if there's much more to say. Is there something you would like to, how you would you like? I mean, all that shit I just said, I'll probably edit out. But my point is like, is there
Mm.
something that, you know, I think we discussed the basics of this moon. Is there something that you really want to drive home that you feel you haven't?
I mean, the some of the key terms would be something like, you know, you have to look at uh if you're looking, especially in a wood dragon year, if you're looking at potential like a gathering wind, okay? So how are storms made? That they can move through and reshape, your landscape. Your storms grow gradually. They kind of cycles come together and start coalescing, and a gathering of moisture from different sources, right? So if we're looking at that as a kind of metaphor, one of the metaphors that we could use is that, if we have to allow things to sort of rise and fulfill naturally. And in spring, we should look to harmonize rather than stimulate. Growth is happening on its own. So that's what you should consider, is that things naturally develop on their, they don't need to be pushed. Like, in fact, pushing, actually, you miss, if you come through and blow at the wrong time, then all the natural gathering together is dispersed, right? So the principle in a wood dragon year is that, especially in spring, is that inspiration goes back to exhaustion if pushed too hard, right? It goes, because wood is the last of water, and water is that place of exhaustion. That year we just came from, where everybody's like, I have no idea what I'm doing, like so if we push too hard, then that sort of delicate gathering inspiration can be pushed back into a place of exhaustion if too aggressive, right? So it's that sense of but if we harmonize, we promote conditions that harmonize our situation broadly, then those things can naturally coalesce and gather together. This is new yin, what's called new yin, because old yin has gone up, right? It's gone for the year. Like winter's gone, is gone. But it left behind new yin, which is the 12-year-old girl, or dakinis, inspiration littered throughout the landscape that we can be receptive to. And one of the ways that, and new yin is there to help guide and bring new yang, fresh yang, into a place of maturity. And one of the ways that does that is by infusing yang with a conscience. Like kind of whispers in its ear, you shouldn't be so aggressive, or like, hey, I see that person's uncomfortable, maybe I should step back, like those sorts of things. It's a very new yin, kind of response, like, think, like, again, like 12-year-old girl that's like, you should be friends, like very simple, so that kind of simplicity, I think, is what the nourishment is. That's where the nourishment is at. So it's kind of sweet, and yeah, it should be. If I'm coming off as romanticizing the situation, yeah, that's spring. We should have new friends and be, generous with people we barely know.